everyone. Welcome to the Miss Sayé show. And today I have beautiful Kristine Carlson, one of my favorite authors. Welcome to the show, Kristine.
Thank you so much, Miss Sayé. It's so wonderful to see you and to be with you on your show.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. So I'm going to jump in. I know you have written many books, starting with this series of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. So could you please tell us what inspired you for that series and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. So my late husband, Dr. Richard Carlson, wrote the original Don't Sweat the Small Stuff book back in 1997 and 98. And it was such a phenomenal success right out of the gate that he invited me to write with him. We wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff and Love together as part of a book series that was born. And there are 9 books in the series to date. After that, the publisher asked me to write Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Women, and I did. And then I have since written Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for moms.
Was it
Yeah,
after
so
you became a mom that you were inspired to write that, or?
actually after I became a grandmom.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. You look beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I have 5 grandchildren, and I wrote that book shortly after the birth of my daughter's first child, Caden. And yeah, I don't think I could have written that book when I was in the throes of motherhood. I really had to find that space where I felt like I had something to offer mothers, where
Right.
when you're in it, it's just such a huge job. And then
Right.
you kind of get a little bit removed and you're like, okay, now I know what worked for me, what didn't work for me. And I can speak to the things that moms really stress about.
Interesting. Yes, I remember when I was in Los Angeles, I walked into a casting office, and that was maybe 8 years ago. And when I sat down, that's where I saw your book, and it was Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it immediately got my attention because it was different. It was smaller. It wasn't long. It was like, and I really liked that shape, so I picked it up, and immediately the couple of things that I read, it lightened up and brightened up my day. And even the title itself, the title Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, it was a great reminder for me. So that's how I was introduced to you and your writing.
Oh, wonderful. That's a great story.
If you'd like to talk about a little bit of working with your husband, and how was that journey, as long as you're comfortable to share with us, we would love to hear.
Oh, absolutely. I guess what I love to start with is that people always thought that Richard had this overnight success, but Don't Sweat the Small Stuff was actually his 10th book. And it premiered a body of work that he was very much a pioneer in the field of psychology with when he wrote about happiness. He was one of the very first authors to ever write about happiness. He wrote a book called You Can Be Happy No Matter What, the 5 principles that will help you keep life in perspective. Those 5 principles are just woven throughout the entire series. They're principles of happiness and well-being that Richard and I really studied together during that time in our lives, before we had children, after we had children, and so forth. So, I guess what I want you to know is that our story was really started in college. We had a really wonderful love affair that just started off with a big bang, an instant recognition that we were really meant to be together.
Hmm.
And we grew our lives. We did what most young people do. We got married when I graduated from college. We started our careers, and then we had our first child 4 years later. And Richard got his master's and PhD in psychology, and I was right alongside of him doing other work. And what was really beautiful is that, we saw his career as an author just really grow from being that starving author to being one of the most well-known writers in self-help to date. And the beautiful thing is that when Don't Sweat the Small Stuff came out, it was his 10th book. It wasn't his first
Wow.
book. It was his 10th book. He'd been writing for 10 years prior, as I just said. And so it just brought this whole body of work to the world, and in a way that prior to positive psychology, I will add.
positive psychology, you said?
Prior to positive
Right.
psychology and the mindfulness movement and
Yes.
everything. So he really was quite a pioneer, and working with him was extraordinary. We always used to say that every couple should write a book on relationship, because every couple would, you know, be able to communicate about their relationship so much better if they did that. And we certainly learned things about each other as we wrote that book too. And then of course publicizing it was just really fun.
How lovely that you share that with us. You know, I love what you said. Every couple should write a book on their relationship, because it's almost like a fingerprint that everybody has their own. Every relationship, it's unique to its own. And it's very easy that when you talk to your girlfriend, you immediately want to relay and you will say, oh, I know that, but you don't know that, because people are so different, and, you know, that combination comes together. So I love what you said. You said you can be happy no matter what. That's one of the books. I'm sure that, you know, the book is very much in depth and you have to read the whole thing. But if you want to name those 5 things, what are those 5 things, 5 elements?
Absolutely. And I'll just mention that if you find this intriguing at all, we have some video courses on don'tsweat.com, and they're based on this work. So the 5 principles of happiness and keeping life in perspective are understanding thoughts, moods, feelings, separate realities, and present moment living. And when you weave these all together, what you basically have are kind of the nuts and bolts of what we call healthy psychological functioning. And so the whole point of it is that nobody's happy all the time, but we try to get you back to happy more quickly. And I think during these times that we're in, this is prominent for people is, you know, we're going through a collective grieving process right now of grieving our lost freedoms, and grieving life has changed
Mhm.
as we didn't know it would. And, you know, this is very similar to what I went through when I lost my husband back in 2006. Suddenly he died on a flight, on the descent of a flight, from a pulmonary embolism. And, you know, I was 43, he was 45 years old. We were in the middle of our lives, at the peak of our lives in many ways. And it was like having the rug pulled out from underneath our feet, my daughters and mine. And, you know, and I understand so much that this whole collective process the entire globe is going through is like having the rug pulled out from underneath our feet, in the sense of we have to really like reinvent life very quickly, and we've had to. And that continues for people. So there is a real collective grieving process going on. But the truth is, you really can be happy no matter what, if you really can understand how to keep life in perspective. And that is at the very core of what resilience really is being able to do that. So that's why I put these courses together. I thought this is a very timely time to mention them.
Lovely. So they can actually go on your website, don'tsweatthesmallstuff.com, and there are courses that they can take on how to be happy no matter what.
Yeah, don'tsweat.com. And then there are happiness training courses. And the cool thing is, the first one, You Can Be Happy, is got video of Richard in it, which is really powerful. So but he's teaching too.
Oh, lovely. I look forward to check it out right after our interview.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you also mentioned that your grief and how you were learning how to cope with that, and how you relate that to what we're going through right now during this time, during uncertain time of COVID. And when did you get inspired to write your latest book, which you told me about? And I'd be glad to, if you could
Put it
show
up.
it to us. Yes.
Yeah. So this book is From
Yes.
Heartbreak to Wholeness, The Hero's Journey to Joy. And this wasn't my first book on grief. I had written a book called Heartbroken Open, a memoir through loss to self-discovery. You know, what is very prominent for me in my loss was the awakening aspect of loss that I didn't count on. You know, I always thought grief was going to be just nothing but darkness and sadness.
Right.
And what happened for me was quite different. I, of course, went through tremendous sadness and tremendous, you know, very deep sadness. However, what I was able to witness in myself was the just fertile ground that I stood on in grief, and how I realized that this was really happened for my life, to make my life richer, to develop my deep sense of connection to humanity, to really, really understand what it means to be a compassionate person, and understand that actually loss and joy are kind of in the same category in our lives, going through suffering and joy, because they're both very alive, and I think that on a deeper level, we choose this human experience to have this spiritual experience in human form. And if you can really grab onto that and really note that everything, even this pandemic, even, even the fires in California, and everything that we go through, that there is an element of something that will be birthed from all of it. And I think that was the real awakening aspect for me, was quite shocking. And I point to that today and everyday life for people who are having their COVID coaster low days, that it's really about like looking for the small ways that bring joy, because joy is always present. You just have to be present to it in your gratitude.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's so easy and simple, but when you are in that dark space, when you are there, to be able to interrupt those negative thoughts with saying, okay, there is a bigger purpose for this. I remember reading Viktor Frankl's book, and he also said there is a greater purpose for what I'm going through, and that what pulled him through. So I relate to that, and I feel it, and thank you so much for sharing with us. So you wrote this book about healing, but you said you have other books on healings as well. What would be the difference between this one, the latest one, and the other ones?
Well, just the time period. When I wrote my memoir, it was the first couple of years of grief. And so it was really raw. And then this book, From Heartbreak to Wholeness, The Hero's Journey to Joy, is the culmination of my 10 years of healing. I had done all sorts of work with other grieving widows, and doing Heartbroken Open Circles, and just a lot of transformational retreats for the grieving, and just speaking all sorts of things. And I just realized that this is my big give back, is this book, is to give back a process of healing, to show people that if they can just see themselves as the hero of their own story, once you are able to do that, you will rise again, and you will thrive because of it. And it's really so much about the stories we tell ourselves about our experience than it is about the actual experience. And that doesn't take away the fact that grieving the loss of a loved one is the greatest grief we ever go through in our lifetimes. And there's nothing that even comes close to it, except for maybe a beloved pet, or a beloved, but anything beloved to you that you grieve is a great loss, and it carries with it deep, deep feelings. And so there are, there really is a path to get through it, and get through it in a way that you come out the other side and you really experience true joy again.
What are some of the tangible tools that can carry you through? Because it seems like a process, and you have to go through this process in order to get refined like a diamond, and gain that what you need to be learning from this experience. As you said, we're not going through it to just go through pain. There's a purpose for that. Something needs to be learned here. What are some of the tools that you can share with us that you have learned that we can maybe implement during that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first tool that comes to mind for me to share with you is that first you have to acknowledge that, grief is present, and even in our society situation with the pandemic, people aren't even maybe fully aware that they are grieving. You have to acknowledge that you have feelings about your situation. And then the second thing is that when something, there's a question that I've always asked myself, and that is, can I change this? And when the answer is no, I cannot change this, then I know that that is something I must surrender to. That is something I cannot fight and resist, but I must surrender to it. And once you allow yourself to surrender to the grieving process, it actually happens very easily. And it isn't something that even is dragged on. You know, it's something that you think of grieving as an emptying out process. And so you have to give yourself time and space to grieve and to heal. That's the next tool that you have is how you allow yourself the time and space to heal. You know, as a culture, we're taught to busy ourselves out of grief.
Right.
And it's really actually very counterproductive to do that. Like you don't want to busy yourself through something that's not going to go away until you actually feel it, you know, and that's where feel it to heal it really comes from, is you must feel it and allow yourself to empty it out in order to heal it. And then, you know, then there's this process of rediscovering who you are, you know, because the other thing is that as a grieving person, we want to go back to the way life was. You know, you'll hear people say that all the time right now during these times. So when is life going to return to normal?
Yes.
Well, the truth is life is not going to return to what it was. We have a new normal. And the sooner that you can come to the awareness of that, that you're not going to retrieve your old life as it was. You have to step into life as it is. And you have to, you know, create this new life. And I think that's where we're all at as a world right now, is reinventing our lives from where we are now. And so, you know, you've surrendered into this process, and now you're in a process of rediscovery. And you can kind of look at that as an adventure in and of itself, you know, like, who are you now in this new life? How are you going to live? Where are you going to get your joy? And, you know, the other thing is, like, what I want to say about this time period is that you have to be a person that can generate joy inside, from the inside out. And that happens by taking what I like to call a golden pause. And a golden pause is just simply taking the space and the time to tune into your gratitude, tune into your breath, become very mindful about your life, with a lot of attention, because right now the small joys are big joys. And we're used to having lots more activity than we have had. We're used to having lots more freedom than we've ever had. And if you're an American, you can't even travel overseas right now. So, you know, we've had a lot of things that have been taken away from us. But the truth is, if we can focus on what we have versus what we don't have, that's going to help a lot in keeping life in perspective right now. And that's also helps you in a deeper grieving process too. When you can focus on the way things are okay right now and live very, very presently, live very present in the moment, not forward think too much about what might be, and don't think too much about what was. You know, if you can really learn to live in the present moment, going back to those 5 principles on happiness, which the last one is present moment living, that is the place you're going to feel the safest. That is the place you're going to feel the best. And that's the place where you're going to generate the most joy, because you'll be tuned into your gratitude.
Beautiful. Sometimes when I'm going through things, I have a toolbox that I have learned from, you know, my mistakes, or when I speak to an expert like yourself, and I'm going through a period of something that I don't know, I have not recognized what it is. And then I bring things out of this toolbox. Okay, maybe it's meditation. Then I see meditation is not working for me right now. Maybe I have to take a walk. Maybe it's not happening like in one day, but I keep bringing these tools to see if this piece is helpful. So that process, I wish I could just go ahead and like recognize what it is that I'm going through and what it is that I need to be doing. But for me, it's not like that. Like, it takes so many, like, I'm putting this piece of a puzzle. Is it this? Oh, no, it's not that. Maybe I should listen to the music. Maybe when my mind is going towards that negative pattern and spiraling down, sitting in one space and breathing is just pick up that tornado and makes it bigger. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes when I meditate, actually, my mind goes back to that positive vibration. So it's not always the same thing for me. Have you ever experienced anything like that? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or is it just me.
No, I think what you're saying is really, really common. And but I think this is, we have to think of life as a practice, and our
Mm,
minds really relate to life as a practice because of the way we're wired. And so, when you learn how to pause and reflect,
mhm,
then
mhm.
that's a practice. And so if your mind is really spiraling in a negative way, the
Right.
best thing to do is just to quiet down, to not necessarily try not to think, but sometimes our feelings become our best navigational guide to the quality of our thinking or the content of our thinking. If you're feeling down in the dumps and feeling negative, then if you can track back to understand that you're probably thinking negatively, then
Right.
all you have to do is have the intention to stop. It's that simple. Like, you don't even have to do anything else. You just have to have the intention that when you're doing that, you're just going to stop doing it. And lo and behold, you will stop, because as human beings, we are not likely to sit and bang our head against a door that's closed because it hurts. And once we make that connection that negative thinking hurts us at the feeling level, we just will naturally vacillate to stop doing that. We will bump up more positively by just that recognition alone. Nothing you have to do. All you have to do is recognize that you're doing it, and you're
Mm,
doing it to yourself. You're making it up
right.
because you are the thinker.
Right.
So
Very interesting. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for guiding me when I go through that path. I can think about that. And you're right. Once you set your intention, you really want to stop, and you say, "I want to stop," then you will stop. It's beautiful. So, this book, the latest book do you have, is it in also audio book at the moment? It is?
yes.
Oh,
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Actually, I recorded the audio of it. And because
Lovely.
we're in between the hardback and the paperback stage of this book,
Uh-huh.
the audio is actually the easiest one to pick up on Audible.
Lovely. It's on Audible. Where
Yeah.
did you find it? Audible. I use Audible myself a lot, but I
Yeah. And
also,
then I have a special gift if you also, if you decided that you wanted to purchase the book, you could go to fromheartbreaktoWholeness.com
Mhm.
and get some soul mantra meditations that go with the writing piece of the book. In the back of each chapter, I have soul mantra meditations, and I have a query of questions. And then I lead you through writing your own hero's journey story piece. So it's got a little workbook section in the back of each chapter too.
But that sounds lovely. We're excited, and we will include all the links that you just mentioned to us, so our audience can visit your website and benefit from all the wonderful teachings that you're doing for us. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show, Kristen. I really appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And if you like the content that we bring you, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Miss Sayé.
Thank you.